Welcome back to the Reading Corner here on Dreamers Defy. We are reading Vengeful. Man, it is so good. I really like hearing y'all's theories on all of this. Yeah, man. If it's your first time here, I don't want to give any spoilers. Head over to the introduction video, start there, catch up to us. You will be glad you did. If you've been along for the ride this whole time, well, that means we're up to chapter 26 today. Now, we haven't heard from the detectives in a while, although I think we're going to hear from them now. So without further ado, Vengeful by AJ Parnell, chapter 26, Knowledge is a Bitch. Spent, Rogers flopped back in his chair and sat staring at the computer screen. He had been going over data for hours, and the further down the rabbit hole he went, the more questions about the case seemed to surface. Going to the station was supposed to bring more resolution to the case, not muddy the waters. True, he had gained some pretty good intel in regard to Landon Bolton, information that had him wanting to take a better look at his brother Luke. Roger's gut still told him that Luke Bolton was not the kind of man who would harm or kidnap a woman, even a woman who he believed had scorned him. Then again, there were the original problems and questions that had surfaced from the onset of the investigation. From everything he and his partner had gathered, he was more convinced than ever that Davies and Bolton had indeed been romantically involved, which would mean Davies had been lying to everyone from the beginning. Sure, he could understand why the doctor would do that. Bolton was handsome, a hero, someone she could easily have fallen for given his good looks. And from when he learned about the interviewing the students, faculty, and friends of Bolton at the school, he was a pretty all-around good guy. Davies could have gotten in too deep, realized she had screwed up by sleeping with her patient, and decided to break it off. Bolton, still reeling from the trauma of the shooting and the students who committed the suicides a few months ago, could have been set off by sudden rejection of not only his lover but his therapist. It did not take a genius to read between the lines in the report where Davies asked for a restraining order, and Bolton, still off in the head, was not able to let her go and had to be reminded on more than one occasion to back off. Then, on who knows how many meds and still unable to cope with all that he had been through, Bolton tried to off himself, and to the surprise of the law enforcement who had been keeping Bolton away from Davies, she showed up to save Bolton's life. After that, from everything he could tell, Bolton had stayed the hell away from Davies. The professor had gotten his act and his life back together, went back to teaching, and kept a low profile for the past 6 months. From everything he and Martinez had gathered, there were no triggers, no warning signs that would have Luke jumping the shark and going after Davies, especially given his overall caring nature. However, his brother Landon was a completely different story. Rogers had no doubt that the more dangerous of the Bolton brothers would have wanted to avenge his brother, whether Luke asked for it or not. Still, there was a problem with Landon hanging out in the United States, seeing as how all the branches of law enforcement were gunning for him. Of course, Landon could have just hired someone to take Davies out, but again, the timeline did not fit with that pattern. Landon Bolton was impulsive, reckless, and would have acted as soon as he knew someone had hurt Luke, if, in fact, he had known about Luke's situation with Davies at all. Forced to hide out, Landon had set up shop in Mexico years ago, choosing a life of crime and a nice seat at the table of a well-known drug cartel lord. According to his friend with the DEA, one who also kept an eye on Luke in hopes of catching his brother, there was no communication at all between the two of them, or at least none that they had discovered. The two men could not have been more different. Luke had set out to change lives for the better, putting others first, even to the point of taking bullets for kids he barely knew, as opposed to his brother, who took lives without care or thought in a world as long as he got what he wanted. Still, as interesting as brothers had proven to be, Miss Abigail Davies had turned out to be far more intriguing. In his 30-plus years of police work, Rogers had never seen so many dead ends. Whenever he had found himself on a trail like this, it either led to a very efficient criminal who was very well connected and knew how to cover the tracks, or someone who had been placed into protective custody, which with his connections, he could find at least a hint of. Considering he and Martinez had not found anything on Davies, criminal or otherwise, it made Rogers wonder what exactly the woman was hiding, or who she was hiding from. Had Abigail been running from someone or something? Rogers' instincts were screaming the latter for several good reasons. Tossing his glasses onto his desk, Rogers looked at his watch. 2:05 a.m. It was time to go home and get whatever sleep he could before Martinez started blowing up his phone. Why did he always draw young pups in training? Grabbing his jacket and turning off the desk light, Rogers pondered. If Davies had lied about her relationship with Bolton and blackmailed her way into her current position, while also making enemies of those she worked with, all while being able to hide who she really was, who was in more danger? Abigail Davies, or the person unfortunate enough to currently be with her? That is the end of chapter 26. It's good to hear about the detectives again and how Rogers is figuring it all out, piecing it all together. Mostly. So far. Yeah, we'll get back to Abigail and the ghost and apparently the shooter Kevin as well. Yeah, we'll get back to that real soon on chapter 27. But that wraps up chapter 26 here on the Reading Corner on Dreamers Defy.